What's up guys, I'm Dean and welcome back to my YouTube channel. 2022 is over and that means only one thing. It's time to rank every film I watched in 2022. If you weren't here last time, I ranked every film I watched in 2021 and there was 54 films. The video was over 40 minutes long and it took ages to edit, so I'm sorry if this doesn't come out in 2023, okay? I'm working on it, whatever. I've seen 60 films this year and I have them all ranked and ready to talk about. We'll be going from last to first, obviously. But before we jump into our list, let's just talk about a few films I didn't watch this year, because I know people are going to comment, oh, where's this film? Where's this film? I've got 10. I'm going to go through 10 films I haven't watched this year. And also, leave a like. That helps apparently with the YouTube algorithm or whatever. Okay. I didn't watch Barbarian. I really wanted to watch it. It just, I wasn't particularly free at the time it was coming out. I didn't watch Don't Worry Darling. I wanted to watch it, but apparently it was bad, so I don't feel that sad I didn't watch it, but also I kind of wish I watched it. I didn't watch Bodies. Also wasn't really going to the cinema in August, September time of year when it came out. I didn't watch Bones and All. I had a booking to go and watch it. I had the cinema booked, but then for some reason, I can't remember why, I was busy and I didn't get to watch it. I didn't watch Smile. They're all kind of September films. I wasn't going to cinema then. I haven't watched Tar, because it hasn't come out in the UK yet. I know that film's supposed to be amazing. I haven't watched The Fabelmans, because that film hasn't come out in the UK yet. I haven't watched Weird, the Al Yankovic movie, because it's on a weird streaming platform in the UK or something and it's difficult to get hold of, but I really wanted to watch it, If it was just on Netflix, I would have watched it in a heartbeat. I haven't watched Babylon, because it's not out in the UK yet. I'm going to get on Babylon as soon as I can, because La La Land is probably my favourite film ever. I love Damien Chazelle, and I haven't seen After Sun. So there's 10 films I haven't seen, but don't worry. You're thinking, wow, Dean, that's a lot of films you haven't seen. I've seen 60. I've seen more than enough. We're going to go through them. Now, starting in 60th place, of course, we have Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the reboot that went straight to Netflix, and I'm going to be completely honest. I remember so little about this film. I know I watched it, and I know I didn't like it. I think I've never seen a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, and I'm not a massive fan of slasher films with nothing beyond that of it just being a boring slasher, but this was just a boring slasher with characters I didn't care about, not even that many cool kills, and it took too long to get to the kills, and the finale was confusing, and it was really flatly and boringly shot, and this film was just one of the most nothing films I've ever seen in my life, but like nothing in a bad way. You get nothing films, which we'll get to, where they just leave you no impression on you, but this, just every morsel of every scene of every shot, there was just nothing there, and I didn't like it. There were no 1-star movies this year though, but moving on to 59th place with 1.5 stars, we have, drumroll, this is going to surprise no one, this is at the bottom of my list, Morbius. I didn't even enjoy the memes around this film. If you want to hear me talk, I did a full review on Morbius. Click up there. I think it's up there to hear my full thoughts on Morbius. I just can't stand Jared Leto. Every single iota within me screams for Jared Leto to never just appear in anything ever again, because I cannot stand him as a man. And what's even worse than Jared Leto is just shoving him in the most mediocre mid-2000s bland comic book movie of all time about a character nobody knew or cared about before the film came out. Sony, what are you doing? What was that end credit scene? What was the point of this film? Matt Smith was having fun and that was fine, but you just wasted him, and apart from that, it was just a boring film with really weirdly shot action and slow-mo that just kind of came out of nowhere and didn't work for me. This film was awful. Can we get to talking about some good movies, please? I don't want to talk about this for much longer. In 58th place, we have Firestarter. This film was short, and that's a compliment because it was bad, and I'm glad it was over quickly. Zac Efron played the dad in this film, and he was all right. The girl who played the daughter did a good job. Nothing against really any of the actors or actresses in this, just the film was boring. The action was nothing. The CGI was nothing. The John Carpenter score was actually really solid, but beyond that, nothing. Nada. Nil. 1.5 stars for Firestarter. And in 57th place, we have the film Blonde. It was the Marilyn Monroe biopic, which is just completely fictionalized and based on no facts. And there's, she gets raped by JFK in the film. And then there's another scene where she had an abortion earlier on in the film, and then when she's pregnant again, her fetus starts talking to her and it's like, hey, don't abort me. I'm the same one that you just aborted. You're not going to kill me again, are you? I'm a fetus. And you see the fetus cam, and then in the next scene, she has a miscarriage. It's a fully awful film, and I understand the message they were trying to go with, but number one, you need to give some nuance to it or some personality to Marilyn Monroe, because all the film was just a clip show of awful things happening to a woman. There was nothing beyond that. There was no growth or arc. You could have rearranged the scenes and no one would have been able to tell. And then on top of that is basing all these fictitious events around a real woman who was existed. Is just horribly perverted and just disgusting. And I wrote a very long Letterboxd review about this one. It's like 1,000 words, and I like the review. So if you're interested in more of my thoughts on an awful film, then go and read that. Moving on to less offensive territory, in 56th place we have Pinocchio. This is the one starring Tom Hanks doing a really weird and bad accent. That's not the first time we're going to talk about this in this video. The CGI was wrong, and it really misunderstood the story of Pinocchio, and for me that's the biggest blunder here, is that they just completely just took the story elements without any of the meaning behind them. And for me, that just didn't work at all, and I wasn't a fan. In 55th place, we have The 355. This film has a solid premise to it. It's about a group of women spies from various countries, all coming together to stop, spoilers, trying to stop Sebastian Stan. And this film would have been fun if it didn't have the most boring spy plot of all time. And think of a spy MacGuffin right now. Just think of these classic spy Fast and Furious whatever films, and think about a MacGuffin they have. And it was probably the MacGuffin they had in this film. It was the thing where they stop all the electricity or all the internet. I don't actually remember. I just know it was bad. And that's the last 1.5-star film we're talking about. In 54th place, we've got the Judd Apatow film on Netflix, The Bubble. Amazing cast. Karen Gillan, Pedro Pascal, others that I can't remember. Is it Guz Khan, I think, is in it? It's got a solid cast, a very funny cast. Daisy Ridley's in it. I mean, Pedro Pascal is phenomenal. Karen Gillan's phenomenal, but the film is awful, and they're not good in this film, and the writing is just like, rich person mean, dumb person do stupid, sex. It was just so derivative of anything of worth, and none of the comedy worked, and none of the commentary. It didn't really have commentary on anything. It was just like, hey, remember, COVID happened, haha, and that was all there was to the commentary. It just didn't work on any level. And I didn't enjoy it. Okay, can we please start talking about some good films? The next 2-star film is the film Moonfall, the most Roland Emmerich film to ever Roland Emmerich. All the scenes felt like they were designed just to tick the checklist of what a disaster film should be, and all the characters range from completely boring to cringy, including one guy who was aged awfully, who was just obsessed with Elon Musk, even though everyone knew, if you had any sense, that Elon Musk was an idiot back whenever this film was released compared to now. Anyway, the Moonfall had an insane premise, and just the sheer scale and the sheer spectacle of it somehow drew me in, and I sort of had fun with it. It was definitely laughing at the film, but I had fun with it. Basically, in the film, the moon isn't the moon, but it's a massive AI that's been there since the birth of time, and it's like that humans have devolved and they don't like new humanity, and the moon's like, hey, I'm going to go kill all the humans by smashing myself into the earth. It is the most stupid premise for a film of the year, probably. But I kind of loved it. I kind of loved it. It was stupid. And it was fun. And the moon fell. And, no one was expecting a great film here. No one was expecting it. And I loved Moonfall, but it's still bad. So I still have to rank it here. But I kind of loved it, but it was bad. But I kind of loved it, but it was bad. In 52nd place, as we reach the 2.5-star films, we have the film Marry Me. I don't remember this film. Let me just recall everything I've ever watched. Okay, it's just a very generic rom-com about this random guy, Owen Wilson, who doesn't know celebrities and he doesn't care about celebrities, but he ends up marrying this singer, and they slowly fall in love with each other, but then they realise the whole thing's a scam, but then they fall back in love with each other. It's a very cliche rom-com, but it worked. You know, it was fine. It was sweet, and the performances were fine, and the music was bad, and it had like weird representation of social media. But Owen Wilson was a good dad, and really, what more do you want from a film? In 51st place, we have the film Men. This might be controversial, but this film had a message about the exploitation of women and kind of sexual assault, and male perpetrators and all of that. But it was incredibly derivative and one note, and I think this film kind of showed the only characteristic to being a woman is trauma and victimhood, and nothing beyond that, and just it was just simplified, and the it just felt performative. The way it was trying to get this message across, it just felt performative and kind of like, women, I know what it's like, don't you worry, I'm on your side, I'm one of the good ones. That's what the film felt like when you're watching it, and you're kind of there with your head in your hands like, no, that's not the point. And like, yes, you're right, technically this message you're putting across is true, but the way you're telling it is just so bad, and I just didn't enjoy it. Okay, in 50th place we have the film Uncharted, the film that definitely didn't come out in 2022 and came out in 2017. If you put a gun to my head and you told me, name one scene in this film that wasn't an action scene, or I will shoot your brains out your head, I would cry and die, because I have no memory of what happened in this film at all. It was incredibly forgettable, and even the action itself was pretty forgettable. When you think like the scene of him falling out the plane, or the scene of these pirate ships being lifted by helicopters, the idea of that is awesome, and I'm thinking now that the idea of the spectacle of that should have really stuck with me, but it didn't. And the only reason I remember those things happened was because it was in all the trailers that I saw 500 times. I did miss the first 5 minutes of this film, but Tom Holland was boring. Mark Wahlberg was boring. Was anyone else in this film? I couldn't tell you for sure. I don't remember it. Wasn't Antonio Banderas in it, and then he was killed or something? That's all I remember about this film. And like, yeah, sure, whatever. Maybe I should like rewatch these films before I talk about them. But no, that's against the energy I'm going for here. Can we talk about some good films now? Because I'm losing my mind. In 49th place, we have Jurassic World Dominion. I hate this movie so much. Worst viewing experience on this entire list, because I got COVID in the cinema watching this film. And like, if you're like, oh, Dean, you went to watch Top Gun Maverick in the cinema, but you got COVID when you watched that, I'd be like, that's a risk I'm willing to take. But Jurassic World Dominion, no. And like, the whole premise of this film was that dinosaurs are now in the real world, and that seems so fun, but they just ignored that, and they were like, no, let's just go back to a facility where dinosaurs live and do nothing else with dinosaurs that we haven't seen before. Yes, there may be, what were they, moths? They weren't moths, they were some stupid insect, locusts or something like that eating things, and we're going to add that in for a bit of fun, and we're going to have Sam Neill back, because everyone loves Sam Neill. I love Sam Neill, I love Laura Dern, I love Jeff Goldblum, and they were fine here. There was too much like, oh, I slide into her Instagram DMs, and that kind of bullshit. But beyond that, I got COVID watching this film, and that's like reason enough to hate it. But there was too many characters running around and all sneaking around from a T-Rex at the end, and who cares about whoever Chris Pratt's characters and Bryce Dallas Howard's characters and the clone girl? Nobody cares about any of that. All the new characters they introduced. Why? Just kill some of them off. Okay, you thought I was getting annoyed then. In 48th place, we have Black Adam. Dwayne Johnson, if you're watching this, you're the worst. And I don't care if you beat me up. Just be in a genuinely great film. I know I'm not the first person to say this, but you action heroes back in the day, like Bruce Willis and Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, they had a great film. Sylvester Stallone, Rocky. Arnie was in Terminator 2. Bruce Willis is in Die Hard. Phenomenal action films that are still talked about today. When I look at Dwayne Johnson's filmography, not a single film in there I will ever think about in 20 years. Sure, he's in some good Fast and Furious films, and I really enjoy the Jumanji films, but none of these films have left an imprint on me. And I'm just saying, Dwayne, go and act in something instead of just standing there being like, "Oh, I'm Black Adam and I don't say anything and I just stand here and I smolder to the camera." Oh. And just the whole idea of him being an anti-hero didn't work because he didn't kill that many people in the film. He didn't do anything that bad. He didn't try to kill the Justice Society. And at the end, the whole point of the film was, the resolution to the issue was Black Adam being like, "Hey, Hawkman, can I kill the literal devil?" And Hawkman's like, "Yeah, bro, you can kill the literal devil." And then he killed the literal devil. Batman would kill the literal devil. There was just no stakes because Dwayne Johnson never even got hurt in any of the fights. And yeah, Pierce Brosnan was good, but at what cost? At what cost? In 47th place, we've got Dog. This was the Channing Tatum film about him having a dog and leaving the army and the dog having issues and the dog running away. And I don't remember this film, but I remember enjoying it. I mean, like, that was a fun film about a dog. And I think that's the only impression that film ever left on me. It was alright, it was fine, it was chill, you know? What more do I need to say? In 46th place, we've got The Adam Project, that Ryan Reynolds film about time travel where he meets his younger self and he makes a lot of Ryan Reynolds jokes, and then it ends with a lightsaber fight. Or I remember the finale was dumb, and I remember some of the time travel stuff was cool, and I remember the Mark Ruffalo bits were sweet, and his dad's dead, which is a shame, obviously. And that was it. Next up in 45th place, we have Fantastic Beasts and the Crimes. No, that was the last one. And the Secrets of Dumbledore. Why is there got to be a horse that chooses the president, man? Why has that never been a thing in any other Harry Potter thing? Why is like every person in this movie just so boring and like they just stand in a big CGI void and just be like, "Oh, I don't think this is the right thing to do with magic," and "Oh, this horse is going to choose the next president." And like, Newt Scamander is always a lot of fun, but these films are moving too far away from him and just boring Jude Law Dumbledore. And I love Jude Law. I don't want to say he's boring. I love him. But here he's boring. In 44th place, we have X. This was a pretty good action film, but it really just wasn't my cup of tea. I think the performances were good. I think the plot was interesting enough, but I think it was focusing more on shock and awe over any kind of plot or semblance of an arc. I think it's one of those horror films where like all these characters are having arcs and the arcs are cut short and they all get murdered, and I just find that deeply unsatisfying. And if you enjoyed this film, I've got nothing against you. It just wasn't my cup of tea, and that's all I've got to say. I don't feel as strongly about this as like Black Adam or Morbius. In 43rd place, we have Better Nate Than Never. You know, good musical, and he goes to the city, and his aunt is Lisa Kudrow, and he's in Broadway, and like he auditions a bunch, and his friends are like, "Hey, you should audition." And then actually, now I think about this film, at the end he came out as gay, and I was like, no, that's sweet. And like, well done Disney for actually making a gay character gay for once and, you know, committing to it as a bit. And I thought it was really sweet. And I think if you're into Broadway and if you don't mind these kind of soppy tween dramas, I think this is the film for you. But I'm not a tween, so it wasn't made for me and I didn't enjoy it, which is completely fine. If a film isn't made for me, then I shouldn't get angry about not liking it. Speaking of films that weren't made for me, in 42nd place we have DC League of Super Pets. Like, this was completely fine. Like, it had all the classic beats of being like, "Oh, here's a kids movie and these are all our problems, help us overcome our problems," but there was just no weight to it, and there was no, you know, there's great kids films, and then there's kid films like this which are made for kids, where there are other kids films which are made for kids and then enjoyed by the whole family. Like The Incredibles is a phenomenal film, and I can enjoy that to this day. It's one of my favourite films ever. But the DC League of Super Pets, I'm kind of like, Dwayne Johnson, do something good for once in your life, bro. In 41st place, we have the Bob's Burgers movie. Okay, I get this out the way first. I've never seen an episode of Bob's Burgers, bro. Okay, so like, I feel like a lot of the dynamics and a lot of the characters and a lot of the jokes wouldn't have worked for me as well as they would have for other people, you know, which once again, It's fine. I feel like I've used up all my anger in this video now, and now I'm just like resorting to just being like, oh, I didn't like this, and that's fine. Which is true. If you don't like something, that's fine. You don't need to shove it down everyone's throats. Yeah, I think the songs were really good. I think it had some real fun stuff in those parts, and I think there were some jokes that worked. But you know, I've never seen it, so what could I say about it that much? Entering the top 40, in 40th place, we have The Lost City, the Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum comedy about one of them being an orphan, one of them being a male model, and them going on an adventure to the Lost City together. And Daniel Radcliffe's the villain, and Brad Pitt's there for 5 minutes, and Brad Pitt being there for 5 minutes was a lot of fun. And Daniel Radcliffe as the villain was so much fun, and it worked so well because he was just a little weird idiot. And a little weird rich idiot, to be more specific, and I think that really worked for him, just being like, oh, I'm Daniel Radcliffe. Daniel Radcliffe should do more stuff, and I should have watched Weird this year is what I'm trying to say. But The Lost City was fun, it had some funny moments, but it was very like 2016 humour for a lot of it too. In 39th place, we have Spiderhead, which is directed by Joseph Kosinski, who also directed Top Gun Maverick this year. This film is built upon a really interesting premise, and it has a great cast like Chris Hemsworth, Miles Teller, and they kind of just trade this interesting premise halfway through the film just for cheap thrills and cheap scares, and when the twist comes at the end, it just doesn't work because the characters are weak and you don't care about these characters because the film didn't do enough building up to them in the first part of the film. So overall, this film was just a bit forgettable, and there were some silly dances, which I'm always a fan of. I'm a fan of silly dances. I didn't mention that when I was talking about Morbius, but silly dances are always a plus. But here, who cares? Speaking about who cares, in 38th place we have Lightyear, one of the worst performing Pixar films ever, somehow starring Buzz Lightyear. This film just pains me for what it could have been. It should have been like a camp, rompy 80s, 90s sci-fi film of him just trancing through Technicolor space and having the time of his life. And I think that would have been really fun and really interesting, and you could have still like done a love letter to sci-fi through that way, but just focusing on like the campiness of Star Wars and Star Trek and that sort of thing, instead of just doing like Interstellar and just being like, oh, I'm Buzz Lightyear and all my friends are dead and I'm sad and I live in this bland world and I'm stuck on this one planet for the entire film. That's not what you want to see. You want to see him trancing through space and having fun, and the film looked great, yes, but just a Technicolor version of this when they go to hundreds of worlds would have been great, and it didn't happen. Speaking of who cares, in 37th place we have The Grey Man, directed by Anthony and Joseph Russo, starring Ryan Gosling and Chris Evans, two phenomenal actors who were clearly having a lot of fun here, and I think this film has some really solid action scenes. I have a memory of one on a tram being a lot of fun, but I remember the characters being largely uninteresting, and yeah, like Ryan Gosling had this thing with a daughter which was fun, and yeah, Chris Pratt was an alright villain. This might be controversial, but here I think he was just like, hey, be a villain. He's like, yeah, I'm just going to say a bunch of rude and mean things because people are used to me being Captain America, and they're not used to hearing me say rude and mean things. So I wasn't a fan of that angle they went with here. And yeah, fine action, but who calls a film The Grey Man and then just makes it so grey and dull and boring? You're shooting yourself in the foot there. It's like calling a film plain. Wait. In 36th place, we have Thor Love and Thunder. I had a full review on this video if you want to check that out. Taika Waititi, you really disappointed me, man. I love Taika Waititi with all my heart. I ranked all his movies. If you want to see me rank all of Taika Waititi's movies, go up there or find it. Just search for it, maybe, bro. Just search for it. But you know, Taika Waititi, you're a phenomenal director. What do you think you were doing? Seriously. This is just Taika Waititi to the max with no control, and I think that's what's lacking here. Some control and some restraint, and it was just all joke and ha ha ha, and look at me, I'm in a really in front of a green screen or in front of a volume, and hey, you can tell everything in this film is shot so flatly, and it was on COVID times, so fair enough, but it's shot so flatly, and I didn't let Gore the God butcher any gods. And, you know, Zeus was funny, and I enjoyed Mighty Thor, and Valkyrie's fun, but not in the film enough. And just these characters didn't really have enough to do, and it was just kind of Thor being like, oh, I'm a big oaf and I'm funny, and everyone didn't like this film, so I don't need to talk about it too much. In 35th place, we have Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Jim Carrey, you are a god amongst men, and I bow down to you humbly. You're great, and I think this film really understood what worked about the first film and what didn't work about the first film, and ran with what worked and forgot about what didn't work. This has a lot more focus on the CGI characters of Sonic, and also Tails and Knuckles get introduced here, and I think it really puts Jim Carrey to the max of him just being a conniving, silly villain, which is all I ever wanted to see from Jim Carrey. And that this film had silly dances, which didn't work here, to be honest, if we can be honest with each other. There's a dance number to Uptown Funk in the middle, which didn't work. But then Jim Carrey does the floss and all is forgiven, and there's a big silly action scene at the end, and it's just a silly, fun romp for kids throughout. And I don't know a lot about Sonic, but I know I liked this film. In 34th place, we have The House. This is a collection of Netflix horror films, which were like 3 different films, which were all interestingly animated, and they had, you know, weird and fun stories to them, and I don't really remember them that well, but I remember enjoying them, and I remember some of them worked better than others, and I remember some of them being like, hey, this is a good, you know, little thing, this is a good little story, and oh no, this story is like a bit dumb and dull, but it was fun, and it was something new, which I enjoyed, and it was creepy, and the animation was solid. In 33rd place, we had Death on the Nile, The Secret of Murder in the Orient Express. I love Poirot, Hercule Poirot. I nearly called him Benoit Blanc, and I think Kenneth Branagh does a good job portraying him. It's a shame so much of this cast are horrible people, and it's a shame the murder mystery was quite uninteresting, and it's a shame this whole thing is awful green screen or the volume, I'm not sure. It's just as they're walking along with the boat and they have the beautiful sunset in the background, and it just didn't look good as a film. Visually it didn't look good, and there were some interesting black and white sequences. He had a mustache origin story at the start of this film, which was a lot of fun, but beyond that I didn't care about any of it. I liked seeing Poirot solve a mystery in his silly little accent. I always enjoy that, but beyond that I wasn't interested. And enough champagne to fill the Nile. Sorry, I felt like I couldn't talk about that film without mentioning that bit. In 32nd place, we have The Minions, The Rise of Gru. I went to the cinema by myself to watch this on a weekday in the middle of my summer, because that's how much I'm committed to watching films at the cinema. It was good. It was funny. It had some fun action. The animation, you know, was solid. It looked good. There was more textures there than what I'm normally used to with these kind of films, and I think it succeeded at everything it was trying to do. I can't really complain about it being a silly, goofy kids film, because that's all it was trying to be, and that's all it was. In 31st place is Jackass 4.5, which is kind of just a compilation of a bunch of the outtakes from Jackass 4 that they put on Netflix, and it doesn't have the same spectacle or shock factor that Jackass 4 had, but I think it was fun. It had some fun facts in there, and it really showed off the camaraderie of the group and how good friends they are, which is always fun to see. It's fun to watch people be friends, and that was the part of this which I enjoyed. We're at the halfway point, so let's all just take this moment to have a breather. So let's just rest for a bit.
2 days later.
Okay, so full disclosure, when I took that break, I wasn't planning on not filming for several days, but I saw the time and I had to go film a podcast, and then the next day I was moving back to university, hence why I've changed location. But I'm just going to continue the video, and you're not going to be able to tell any difference, and hopefully this hasn't, made an impact on the flow or the pacing of this video at all. But I'm sorry, okay guys, I'm busy, I've got stuff to do. Anyway, we got to 30th place, didn't we? In 30th place, I have put The Bad Guys. It was a really fun animated movie about some bad guys. There's some thieves who turned good. It had a really solid cast. The standout being Sam Rockwell, an actor I absolutely adore. And I think the animation style was really, really interesting and unique here too, because it was 3D animated, it was CGI, but the textures made it look 2D and hand-drawn, which really worked for me. This film was funny. I think the action worked, the visuals worked, and I think the characters worked, and overall, it was just a fun kids film. In 29th place, we have a big film. It's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Go check out my full review for that film if you're interested, but I enjoyed this film. I thought it worked. I thought it was good, but not all of it worked for me. I think what really worked was Sam Raimi's direction. I think the way it was shot and the way certain sequences were staged, I think were excellent. I think the horror worked really well. I thought the cameos worked really well, because basically they just put all the cameos in one scene and went, here are your cameos, you happy now? And then killed them all the next scene, which was really number one, really satisfying, and number two, it didn't really bog down the entire film with the idea of cameos. But what disappointed me was, number one, we didn't get much exploration of the multiverse. You know, we only went to, 3 universes, which didn't massively work for me. And also, Wanda as the villain, although she was physically intimidating and she was a really great threat, I wasn't completely sold on her transition to a villain, because I think this film really missed the missing step between the end of WandaVision and the start of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where she's just happy to kill a bunch of people. I thought that was a bit out of character. The pacing was a bit off, and, you know, there were certain other elements that didn't completely work for me. There was some dodgy CGI, but the action was mostly good. Sam Raimi was a good choice for the direction. The horror worked, and I think it's kind of unique for a Marvel movie, which I did enjoy. In 28th place, we've got the only Christmas film this year that I watched, and that is Spirited, the one starring Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell. This was a lot of fun, and what worked here for me was the retelling of a classic story. It's a retelling of A Christmas Carol. And I think the premise itself was really great and really solid, but I don't think it was fully explored. I think there were some weak musical numbers, but the characters worked, and I think their growth worked mostly. Just Ryan Reynolds was supposed to play the Scrooge, supposed to be a horrible person, and I wasn't fully convinced that he was this horrible person he was supposed to be at the start of the film. But apart from that, I think it had a really brave ending. I won't spoil it, obviously, but I think it had a really brave ending, and it committed to it, and I think that worked, and it was just a fun Christmas film. I think I'm a little disappointed it didn't properly use its premise to its full extent, because the premise, like I said, is amazing, but it was fun, so what can I complain about? In 27th place, we've got See How They Run. It was a whodunit that I watched on Disney+, also starring Sam Rockwell, an actor, as I just said, I adore. I think he did really well here. I enjoyed the character he played, and I think the dynamic between him and the other detective worked, and I think what really worked here were the characters. This was kind of trying to be a pastiche, a parody of the whodunit genre, but all it kind of did was just point at the trope of a whodunit and go, that's something whodunits do, isn't that fun? And then the film just goes and does it, where a good parody, for me, needs some commentary on the genre itself instead of just pointing out its features and moving on. I think the murder mystery was solid, you know, it was interesting enough. I figured it out, which I'm quite happy about, which is always, you know, a bonus, because you just feel that bit of validation. And I think, like I said, the cast worked, and Tim Key was in this film. If you don't know Tim Key, then you're missing out. Give it a googs. In 26th place, we have Hustle, the Adam Sandler basketball film. What really worked about this film for me, and how I could tell it was a well-made film, was someone who does not understand or does not know, like, I've never seen a game of basketball, I really enjoyed this film. Basketball isn't a thing in the UK massively, so, like, I'm mostly unaware of it. But as a sports film largely focused on basketball, it does such a good job with its two leads, and I think Adam Sandler does a really special performance here, that it does convince me to buy in to this sport and buy into the competitiveness of it. And I think the characters are really compelling, and I think it tells such a real story, which I really, really enjoyed. In 25th place, we have Apollo 10.5, a really interesting animated film by Richard Linklater. The animation here is really, really special and really unique. Just the style of it I found really captivating and really beautiful, and that worked really well for me. And this film is kind of just, it's a look at the space landing from Richard Linklater's point of view when he was a kid during that time, and it's a really nostalgic film, and it really utilizes nostalgia in an amazing way, because someone who wasn't born anywhere near the 60s, I found it really nostalgic. I had the sense of nostalgia that he was giving over to the audience, and I think it did a really good job of conveying what I assume living in that time must have been like as a kid, while still having some fun space sequences chucked in there as well. Speaking of the 60s, in 24th place we have Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. I found this a conflicting watch. Number one, the film was too long, and number two, it didn't tell enough of Elvis's life, which sounds largely contradictory and pretty stupid. What I'm trying to say is I think the film did go on for too long. I think it didn't really earn its runtime, because for me, by the end, I was feeling a bit bored and a bit tired. but also it did skip over so many things in Elvis's life. So I think what should have been done, instead of trying to tell the comprehensive story of Elvis's life, they should have just focused on one element. Maybe just focus on that finale of his life. I think there were some really weird decisions musically, and I was kind of frustrated by them not playing a lot of full songs, but apart from that, it was pretty good, and I enjoyed a lot of the direction within certain scenes, especially the performances, and it goes without saying, Austin Butler was amazing. Tom Hanks, on the other hand, what is it with Tom Hanks and weird accents this year? I know I'm not the first person to say it, and I won't be the last, but bizarre. Next up, we have Not Okay, a really interesting film that's kind of a satirical comedy on social media while also trying to be a hard-hitting drama about trauma. Now, these two ideas, they don't massively weld together within this film well. I'm not saying it can't be done, obviously it can, but this film tries to balance these two ideas and it feels a bit disjointed at times. I think both the elements really work. I think although the plot is straightforward and quite easy to predict, I think it's still quite a complex film about morals around social media and that sort of thing. While also, I think a lot of the social media parody is a lot better than a lot of stuff we see, because a lot of the time that can come off as cringy, and here it is cringy, but it's designed to be, and I think the comedy works. It's just these two ideas, they don't come together as satisfyingly as they could have done. In 22nd place, we have Bullet Train. This film had some really solid action, some really fun characters, and I think overall was just a lot of fun. It was very over the top and it was very silly, and I enjoyed it. I think we are now in the territory of films which I just really do enjoy. I think Bullet Train worked as an action comedy, and I think, yeah, it was a bit silly, and yeah, it was trying to create depth when they were failing, but apart from that, it was good fun. In 21st place is Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. This film is really good at cameos and at nostalgia and chucking in characters that people will like to see while still telling a cohesive story, because these cameos are a part of the plot and they are integrated within the film, so it doesn't feel like they're sticking out. It doesn't feel like Space Jam: A New Legacy, because it's kind of similar approaches they go to cameos, where this does it a lot better because it's so well integrated into the plot. I think the melding of different animation styles was really interesting. I thought it was funny, and yes, it was a little predictable, but the voice acting was good, it was funny, and it was nice to see some Disney characters and some also non-Disney characters. This one might be a bit controversial. As we enter the top 20, we have The Northman. This film is definitely a technical marvel. The cinematography is phenomenal, the music is great, the action is awe-inspiring, and I think the lead's performance, his arc, is perfect. But surrounding that, I found the plot very predictable because it was just, Shakespeare. And I think the twists were very transparent to see coming, and I think there were some weird decisions made, but the lead did great, Willem Dafoe did great, and overall I had a great time watching this film. I just think it's a little overrated. In 19th place is Jackass Forever. This was the first Jackass thing I've ever watched, and I wasn't expecting to enjoy it, just because this style of comedy isn't usually my thing. But I had a really good time with this, and it really surprised me at how funny I genuinely found this. I think it had some really, really solid comedy which worked perfectly, and I think it had some just great great ideas and some great it really came up with these concepts of these gags very well, and I think there were a few highlights, and I can't remember the last time I laughed in the cinema as much as I did when I watched this. Another controversial one, in 18th place, we have Ambulance, Michael Bay's film of 2022. I've never liked Michael Bay, and I've always thought of the term of Bayhem, which is Michael Bay mayhem, quite derogatory. I think that's an insult to give a film until I saw this, and I think I kind of understand it, because this film is so overindulgent. The drone shots, the action, it's really just over the top and just completely overdoing it, but I secretly really, really loved it. And pairing this over-the-top action and over-the-top cinematography with Jake Gyllenhaal's very over-the-top performance, I think it works excellently, and I think there's some real emotion there as well with Yahya Abdul-Mateen III, I hope I got that name right, and Isa Gonzalez. I think there's some really great chemistry in this film between the characters, and I think the action worked really, really well. It did go on for too long, but I had fun with this film, and I was smiling the entire time, because I was like, this film is stupid, and it knows it's stupid, and it's leaning into its wacky, weird action without overdoing it on the wackiness. In 17th place, we have Prey, the straight-to-Disney Plus Predator film. This is actually the first Predator film I've seen, but I really, really enjoyed this. I think the idea of having this young girl go up against the Predator and where she comes from within her tribe and the struggle she was going through before the Predator showed up, I think was really interesting. And I think her proving herself and taking down the Predator was done excellently. There was some really great action, there was some really tense scenes, and this film just looked beautiful. It's very rare to find an action film that looks as beautiful as this does. Just the focus on the nature around and the nature and the landscapes, I think, was excellently done, and the cinematography was really, really excellent. And like I said, the action was good. There was interesting use of shadow and color and darkness, and I think it just worked. I'm really excited to check out more Predator films now I've seen this one. In 16th place, we've got Roald Dahl's Matilda the Musical. I love Matilda the Musical on the West End. I've actually gone to seen it twice, and both times I really enjoyed it. And I think this was a really, really excellent portrayal of that story on screen, because the musical story is slightly different from the Matilda story we're all used to. They chuck in a few other elements there, and I think the exploration of that was great. I think all the songs were done justice. They added a song and they took some songs out, but all the choices they made, I think, were justified because it's a short film, and that shorter runtime definitely works. They might have chucked out some of my favourite songs, but I don't mind because I understand the reasoning behind the creative decisions they made, and I think this is a really good adaptation. One thing I would note is the use of lighting here, and the use of the colour through the lighting, I thought was really interesting and really excellent. A lot of the time you get these the musical adaptations of a stage show, I think they can focus too much on making it feel like it's being performed on a stage on the screen, and I think that wasn't done here, but it still felt like a stage musical through the lighting and the cinematography and elements like that. I thought it was cast amazingly. I think everyone filled their role really great, and I think it's a really good adaptation of not only the Matilda novel but also the Matilda musical. In 15th place, we have Fresh. This was a really fresh horror film. I think it had a really, really great lead up to the horror and to the action, and I think that really gets you invested in your characters. And I think without that first half hour, 40 minutes, whatever it is, of build up, the rest of the film doesn't work, because the whole film is a lot of fun, and it kind of tells the story of cannibalism in a humorous and comedic way. And I think the characters are really, really relatable, and they're really fun, and I think the finale does the entire film justice of kind of just devolving into a horror slasher type thing, kind of like the ending of Get Out. I really enjoyed Fresh as a whole, and it was one of my favourite horror films of the year. In 14th place, we've got Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. You know the drill, I've got a review of it up there. I thought this film really worked mostly. I have a few things that I disliked about it and a few things I would change personally, but I thought this film was Marvel's best of the year. I think the way it explored Chadwick Boseman's death and the death of the on-screen character of T'Challa, and the way it explored the grief of all the characters surrounding him, I thought was perfect. I thought this was a really great exploration of grief. But pairing that with kind of the over-the-top comic booky elements of this film didn't really work for me. And don't get me wrong, I'm the first person to champion a weird and wacky and over-the-top comic book film, but the tone here kind of clashed with a lot of those elements. I thought they were overdoing it in some places, giving lots of characters new suits and that sort of thing. And I think the supporting cast here really worked. I think every person did amazing. Queen Ramonda especially. What a phenomenal performance, which I was not expecting at all. But I think it focused on too many characters and didn't really give enough of them full arcs, especially Okoye. I thought they were really leading up to something special with her, and then they kind of forgot about it. Something I would like to say, though, Namor as a villain was phenomenal. One of the best villains the MCU has seen in a while, because he was right, and he really was a proper anti-hero here, and I cannot wait to see him appear in the MCU again. 13th place, we've got Nope. This might be my least favourite Jordan Peele film, but Jordan Peele is amazing, so the film can't be that bad. I think the way this was shot and the ideas surrounding it were really, really interesting. I think it had some really great moments of genuine horror, and I think the mystery surrounding it really worked. This like Lovecraftian creature in the sky was terrifying, and I thought it looked great, and I thought the way it moved and the way the characters reacted to it worked really, really well. And I think we got some really interesting characters to go alongside this horror film. I thought it worked excellently, and is also one of my favourite horrors of the year. In 12th place, we've got Turning Red, Pixar's new film of the year. I thought this was really, really great. I think it showed us cringe, and it showed us like teens, or pre-teens, I can't remember, just being goofy in such an excellent way, because cringiness is great, and when it's well utilised in a film, it's amazing. And I thought the characters were really likeable, and I think the struggle they went through felt really real and genuine, and I think this film was funny, and it was animated well, of course. What more do you expect from Pixar? And I think this really, when you compare it to Lightyear especially, is a phenomenal film, and one of the best animated films of the year. I had so much fun watching it. I think the finale was over the top and goofy, and that really worked for me, and I thought the family dynamics here really, really worked. And yes, it was kind of predictable how it developed over the course of the film, but what more do you want? In 11th place, we have The Menu. This film kind of caught me by surprise because I wasn't expecting it to be as fun and as solid as it was. I think it had some really, really great commentary here on filmmaking and on creating art and on film criticism itself, and I think all the performance did a great job of carrying that. I think it was over the top and wasn't scared to be silly, which, as I just said, I'm always a big fan of, and I think overall, the horror worked and the comedy worked and the commentary really, really sold this film for me. I thought Ralph Fiennes was amazing, Anya Taylor-Joy was amazing, and Nicholas Hoult gave a really special performance here, which I think is a bit underrated. We are now entering the top 10, and in 10th place is my favourite horror film of the year, Scream 5. This was actually the first Scream I'd ever seen, and I've gone back and watched some of the other Screams now, but this is still my favourite. I thought the commentary on the horror genre and kind of the parodic, that's probably not a word, nature of it, really, really worked. I think the way it kind of addressed sequels and reboots I thought was funny, and it hit it on the nose without being like too in your face and like, oh, we're being all goofy and referencing films. I thought it was really fun, and I thought the comedy worked, and the horror was exciting and quite tense and scary, while still not diminishing the comedy, and the comedy didn't diminish the horror, which I think is a very difficult balancing act to get right. All the performances were solid, and I think the reveal at the end worked excellently, and this film kind of supported The Last Jedi, which I'm always a fan of. The Last Jedi is great. In 9th place is Avatar: Way of Water, a film I didn't have much expectation for because, you know, I rewatched the first Avatar film before this, and it's fine. You know, it's a solid action film. Of course, it's a technical marvel of its time, but the plot is very straightforward. I found the characters uninteresting. But we're not here to talk about the film. We're here to talk about Avatar: Way of the Water, an excellent film. It's 3 hours and like 10 minutes long, but it really earns that runtime. I think it really deserves that runtime, and it really makes full use of it. I thought this film looks unlike anything I've ever seen before, and it is just a miracle, the technical marvel that James Cameron was able to pull off here. I thought the action was over the top and excellent and out of this world, but what really worked for me were the more quiet, contemplative moments about exploring the ocean and kids being kids. And just it was out of this world. That this film worked when Sigourney Weaver plays a teenager, and it worked so well. I was not expecting this to be as good as it was, but I really, really had a great time watching it. In 8th place, we have Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, the best animated film of the year, without a doubt. You know, so many people have tried to tell the Pinocchio story and modernise it, and it really worked here. And who would have guessed, to modernise Pinocchio, you have to go chuck it back into fascist Italy. I think that added a really unique dynamic to the story, while still keeping the core elements of the plot, while also keeping the core elements of who each character is and what they're supposed to represent. This is what a Pinocchio reboot or remake should be like. I think all the performances were great. I think it was a really emotional film, and I think Ewan McGregor did a great job voice performing specifically, and it just looked phenomenal. I'm a sucker for stop motion. If you do stop motion right, I think it's the most beautiful form of making a film. I think it can really, really work, and it worked excellently here. This film, just the look of it was so wonderful and so perfect, and Guillermo del Toro is a genius. What more is there to say? In 7th place, this might come a bit out of left field for some people, but it's The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I think this was an excellent comedy. As I look down here, I've got my Empire magazine with Nicolas Cage's face on the front. I love Nick Cage, and I think this film did a great job of kind of exploring a lot of his personal style as an actor, while not hitting you over the head with it. If you had no idea who Nicolas Cage is, I think this film would work really, really well. Pedro Pascal is amazing at comedy, and I think here in this film he really, really shines. It is personally my highlight. This film had many laugh out loud moments. I think it addressed filmmaking as a whole in a really fun and interesting way, and I think the plot itself had some surprises in it and carried us through. Yes, it was silly and weird and goofy, but I love all that stuff, and I think it works really well here. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent really hit it out of the park for me, and is one of the best films of the year. In 6th place, we have Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery. Knives Out is one of my favourite films of all time, like top 5 maybe. And I was really anticipating Glass Onion, because the thing about Knives Out is that it's such an interesting restructuring of the whodunit. It's a really classic whodunit story, but the way it's told is completely unique while still keeping true to the core elements of a whodunit. And I was like, how can Rian Johnson revolutionize a genre twice? I couldn't see it happening. And then he just went and did it, and this film blew my mind. It's a lot more over the top. It's a lot funnier than the first Knives Out. I still prefer the original Knives Out, but this one works so well. The cast is phenomenal. Out of this world. They had some really, really great choices, and I thought the way they told the story and the way it was structured and the way it was paced was executed perfectly, if you mind the pun, and I think the reveal at the end was really, really well done as well. Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc is slowly becoming one of my favourite fictional characters ever, which just feels bizarre to admit. Okay, we're entering the top 5, and this is where things may get even more controversial, and even more people might disagree with me. But remember, this is my personal preference. Go comment your top 5 films of the year down below. Entering the top 5, though, we have many people's favourite film of the year, Everything Everywhere All at Once. This film is a marvel that it worked. I would love to see the script of this film, because this film is so wacky and confusing and just out of this world, while still telling a really grounded story and making complete sense as you watch it. And every time you watch it, the plot just there's more layers to it than you saw before, and the emotional struggle of the characters, there are more layers on it to what you saw before. Just the exploration of the multiverse was perfect, and I think the emotional journey that the characters went through was perfect, and the action was phenomenal, and I really, really enjoyed this film. I enjoyed some other films this year more than I enjoyed this one. In 4th place, though, we have The Banshees of Inisherin. This film also really came out of nowhere for me, but it was an absolutely phenomenal film. I think it was really beautifully shot. It had some amazing sequences, and I thought the music, although a bit repetitive, was really went well with the film and was a great accompaniment to it. But what really worked here were the 2 lead performances and the comedy surrounding that. I thought this film had some really, really great black comedy, and although it seems like it's a simple story, there are really complex messages about conflict and about friendship and about loneliness and about masculinity. I think all these themes, when you pay attention, were explored phenomenally, and I think this is one of my favourite films ever, if not one of my favourite films of the year. We're now entering the top 3. Okay, guys, we're almost there. Let's keep at it. In 3rd place, we have The Batman. This is my favourite live-action superhero film of all time. Matt Reeves' direction was out of this world. I think the cinematography, the way they used darkness and shadow and light, was unlike anything I've seen in any superhero film before. I think this is the second best looking superhero film after Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It just really showed this neo-noir superhero film in such a perfect way, and that's without even getting into the characters of just Robert Pattinson. He gave a phenomenal performance as Batman and was super convincing, and it just felt so grounded and real, which is something I usually I don't like grounded and real comic book films, because it means let's not do over the top action, and let's focus more on like science and realistic gadgets, kind of like the Dark Knight trilogy, which I do enjoy. But here it's grounded in the sense that Batman feels like such a real person, and this film kind of shows you what being Batman would do to a man, and I think that is phenomenally explored. I think Paul Dano as the Riddler was a fresh take on a villain that was perfect, and I think the action was phenomenal, and the Penguin was, unrecognizable and really, really fun. And I think the music, this is one of my favorite film scores of all time. Michael Giacchino really wrote something special for this film, and I think this superhero film is unlike anything we've seen before, and I really just want to see more director-led superhero films. This film was it was so close to perfect. I think maybe the detective element was a bit more straightforward than I would have liked from the first detective Batman film, but I still had real fun with it, and I cannot wait to see this universe revisited. In second place, we have the summer blockbuster of the year, Top Gun Maverick. Who knew this time last year that this film was going to be as good as it was? And I think we've all seen the film. We've all agreed that it is phenomenal. It's just, what really stands out to me, I've seen this film 4 times in the cinema. It's the film this year I have seen the most. What really stands out to me is that when you approach a film about the military and about aircraft, it's very easy to make everything look really great. But here there is such vibrancy in colour, in the sky and in water, and I think the vibrancy really worked. And there are grey screens like on the aircraft carrier, but what these scenes really have, which a lot of these grey and bland films lack, is clarity. And I think clarity is the key here with this film, because the action and the character motivations, there's just such clarity to it. This film has action unlike anything I've ever seen before, and even when I'm on my 4th watch of this film in the cinema, I'm still sitting on the edge of my seat, my gripping the armrest, because I'm nervous about what's about to happen. I think the action here, some of the best action in any film ever, and the sound was amazing. I've seen this film in IMAX 3 times now, and every single time, just the opening with Danger Zone, I adore. I think it's one of the greatest opening sequences to a film ever. And just Tom Cruise, an insane man who doesn't understand how the world works. He understands cinema, and he understands how to make a film that we will all enjoy and we will all love. And I just love this film so much, and it is one of my favourite films of all time, and one of the best filmed action sequences of all time is that finale. This film is just so good. I should say, before we get into first place, I really struggled putting the top 3, which is the Batman, Top Gun Maverick, and the film we're about to talk about, in order, and really you could make a good argument that could make me change my mind and put them in any other order. But in first place, I had to put RRR, and I think what really gave this film the edge over the other two was just how over the top it is, and how unabashed it was in, this is a silly blockbuster, but not only is it silly, it has such strong-willed lead heroes. And I think these action stars that star in this film, number one, the action is out of this world, and the hand-to-hand combat and the large-scale battles are unlike anything I've ever seen in American cinema before. But they're really funny, and the bonds they have feel so real, and I just loved every part of it. If you don't know what RRR is, it's on Netflix. I can't recommend it enough. It's an Indian film. It's 3 hours long, about 2 revolutionaries, and that's all I'll say, because just go watch the film. It will blow you away. There are some sequences of action, like I said, which are phenomenal and out of this world, and are really unique, and some of the best action I've ever seen in any film ever. But do you want to hear a little secret about this film if you haven't seen it before? It's also low-key a musical, and I love musicals, and there's a whole dance number, which is one of the best dance numbers I've seen in any film before, and it's not what you're expecting when you're going into this Indian action epic Just the music was out of this world. The characters were really grounded and their friendship felt real and the emotion behind it was real. And it was really over the top and silly while still having an emotional core that really, really worked. I really hope that we see more blockbusters like this, because this is what a blockbuster should be. It's got over-the-top action, great music, fun characters, but real grounded stories and real grounded characters with real struggles. This film was unique and unlike anything I've seen before, and I cannot recommend it enough. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this very long video. I'm sorry it's so long, but I watched a lot of films and I really enjoyed talking about them. If you can't tell, please leave a like, please comment your favourite films of the year down below, and please subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me, because I love making these YouTube videos and having you guys watch them is just an added bonus. I really, really appreciate every single one of you. Hope everyone had a great 2022 and watched some great films, and let's hope 2023 is just as good. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.